Liam Sterling felt the weight of $74 billion settle not onto his shoulders, but deep into the quiet center of his soul. It was a silent gravitational pull, a truth so vast it was almost abstract. For 2 years he had lived a life of shadows and whispers, of encrypted calls at 3 a.m. and transatlantic flights that existed only as credit card charges his wife never checked. He had architected not a building of steel and glass, but a leviathan of global commerce, merging two titans of the sustainable energy sector. The final signature, transmitted digitally from a secure server in Zurich, had landed just an hour ago. He had watched the confirmation email arrive, a simple two-word message, "It is done," and felt not elation, but a profound and weary peace. He thought of his 5-year-old son, Leo, and the future he had just secured. He thought of his wife, Chloe, and the life he hoped they could finally begin to build, a life free from the suffocating condescension of her family. He closed his laptop. He was just Liam Sterling, a moderately successful architect coming home, and that was the only identity that mattered. But he was wrong. His wife thought he was a man of modest means and even more modest ambition, a harmless, necessary fixture in her life. She didn't know that the man walking through their front door held the economic fate of entire countries in his hands, and within 1 week, her entire world, built on the fragile stilts of arrogance and old money, would shatter into a million pieces. I'm so glad you're here for this story today. If you enjoy stories about the triumph of integrity and seeing arrogance meet its match, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring more stories like this to you. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now, let's get back to Liam and the choice he was about to face. The house was pristine as always. A cool, minimalist space of white walls, polished concrete floors, and glass overlooking a manicured Los Angeles canyon. It was Chloe's design, a testament to her family's aesthetic. Beautiful, expensive, and emotionally sterile. She was in the living room, standing beside 2 packed Louis Vuitton suitcases, her phone pressed to her ear. She was laughing, a light tinkling sound that used to enchant him, but now often sounded like breaking glass. She waved a dismissive hand at him, a gesture that meant, "I'm on the phone, don't interrupt." He stood in the entryway, the ghost of a multi-billion-dollar handshake still on his skin, and felt himself shrink back into the role he was expected to play, the quiet, unobtrusive husband. "Marcus, you're terrible," she chirped into the phone. "No, of course he won't mind. What else does he have going on?" She glanced at Liam again, her eyes sweeping over his simple gray suit, a suit he wore specifically because it projected an air of unremarkable competence. Her expression was a familiar cocktail of pity and mild affection. "He's just got home. Looks tired, poor thing. Probably spent all day fussing over window placements." Liam felt the familiar dull ache behind his ribs. It wasn't anger, not anymore. It was a kind of weary sorrow. He had spent the day in a virtual war room with the CEOs of 2 of the world's largest corporations, navigating the treacherous currents of antitrust regulators and hostile shareholders. The final hours had been a brutal, high-stakes chess match played across 3 continents. Fussing over window placements. The caricature was so complete, so confidently delivered, that for a moment he almost believed it himself. She hung up and turned to him, her smile bright and frictionless. "Liam, darling, you're home." She glided over and gave him a perfunctory kiss on the cheek, her scent a cloud of expensive perfume. "Listen, something has come up. Marcus just got his big promotion at the firm, Vice President of Acquisitions. We're all so proud. To celebrate, he's decided to treat me to a little getaway. St. Bart's, just for a week. A last-minute thing, you know how he is." Liam looked at the suitcases. He looked at her face, flushed with excitement. There was no question in her voice, no request for permission. It was a statement of fact. "St. Bart's," he repeated, his voice flat. That's nice. It's going to be fabulous, she said, her attention already drifting to a checklist on her phone. Anyway, I'm leaving in 2 hours. The flight is out of Van Nuys. Marcus is taking the jet. I need you to handle Leo for the week. It's all arranged. His school schedule is on the fridge, Mrs. Gable will still come in the afternoons to help with his homework, but you'll need to do the mornings and evenings. Dinners, bath time, all of it. You can handle that, right? He thought of the week ahead. He was scheduled to preside over the first integration meeting between the two newly merged boards. He was meant to give the keynote address at the World Economic Forum's Emergency Energy Summit in Geneva, an address he would now have to deliver via video link from his home office. He had calls scheduled with the German Chancellor and the Japanese Minister of Economy. I have a few things on at work, Chloe. She finally looked at him, truly looked at him, and her brow furrowed with a faint, patronizing concern. Oh, sweetie, I'm sure your little projects can wait. It's just 1 week. Think of it as a chance to bond with your son. You're always so busy with your blueprints and models. This will be good for you. She patted his arm, a gesture one might use on a well-meaning but slightly incompetent employee. Besides, Marcus is so excited to have me there. This promotion is a huge deal for the family. It secures the Preston legacy. The Preston legacy. The phrase hung in the air between them, thick and suffocating. Her family's firm, Preston & Sons, was a regional real estate development company that specialized in luxury condos. It was old money, built on generations of shrewd and sometimes ruthless deals. They saw Liam, a man who had built his own small firm from nothing, as a curious anomaly. They couldn't comprehend his work, designing sustainable, carbon-neutral urban infrastructure, so they belittled it. They called him the eco-architect, a term they imbued with a sneering, dismissive tone, as if he were planting petunias in window boxes instead of designing cities of the future. And Marcus. Her brother was the distilled essence of Preston arrogance. He treated Liam not with overt hostility, but with a kind of amused contempt, as if Liam were a strange pet Chloe had brought home. He delighted in making subtle digs at Liam's income, his background, his perceived lack of ambition, all while presenting himself as a magnanimous brother-in-law. I understand, Liam said, the two words a surrender. Arguing was pointless. It would only lead to a fight where he would be painted as unsupportive and petty. For years he had chosen peace over pride, telling himself it was for Leo, for the fragile harmony of their home. He had kept his true success a secret, initially out of a romantic notion that he wanted to be loved for himself. Now he wondered if he had simply built his own cage, gilded with their ignorance. Perfect! I knew you'd understand, Chloe said, her relief immediate and absolute. She had gotten what she wanted. The potential conflict had been averted. Now, I have to finish packing. My mother is probably going to call. Be a dear and handle her, will you? You know how she gets. He knew exactly how Eleanor Preston got. She would call to express her soaring pride in Marcus, and in the same breath, her subtle disappointment in Liam's static career. She would ask if he was managing to cover the mortgage on their Canyon home, a home whose deed was solely in Liam's name, paid for in cash from a bonus 3 years ago, a fact they were all blissfully unaware of. They believed Chloe's trust fund subsidized their lifestyle, a fiction Liam had never bothered to correct. It seemed to make them happy. An hour later, Chloe was gone, leaving a trail of perfume and a list of instructions on the kitchen counter. Liam stood in the silent house, the list a stark white rectangle on the black granite. Leo's lunch, no crusts. Swimming on Tuesday, pack goggles. Play date with the Astors on Thursday. Remind them we are members at the club. It felt like a dispatch from another universe. He picked up his phone, which had been buzzing silently in his pocket. A dozen messages. His partner, David Chen, from their London office. They're calling it the Sterling Accord. The FT wants a comment. What do I tell them? A text from the CEO of the acquired company. Liam, monumental. Simply monumental. Drinks when you're back in New York. A message from a blocked number he knew belonged to a senior White House advisor. POTUS is pleased. Call when you have a moment. He looked from the glowing screen of his phone to the list on the counter. No crusts. He walked over to the refrigerator and gently removed the list. He folded it carefully and placed it in his pocket. Then he opened his worn leather portfolio, the one Marcus called his coloring book. He took out a single sheet of paper, a schematic for the new global headquarters, a building designed to produce more energy than it consumed, a building that would redefine the skyline of whatever city it graced. He laid it on the counter where the list had been. He heard the soft patter of feet and turned to see his son, Leo, standing in the doorway, rubbing his eyes, a small stuffed bear clutched in his hand. "Daddy, where's Mommy?" Liam's heart ached. All the billions, all the power, all the secret triumphs, they all melted away in the face of that simple question. He crossed the room and knelt, pulling his son into a hug. "Mommy had to go on a trip for work, buddy. It's just you and me for a little while." "Like a boys' club?" Leo asked, his voice muffled against Liam's shoulder. Liam smiled, a real smile this time. "Yeah, buddy, exactly like a boys' club." He picked Leo up, settling him on his hip. In the cool, silent house, with the weight of his son in his arms and the weight of the world on his phone, Liam Sterling felt a strange sense of clarity. The game he had been playing for years was over. He just hadn't realized it until now. A new one was about to begin, and this time, he would be the one making the rules. The first day of the boys' club was a study in surreal contrasts. Liam woke at dawn, his body still humming with the nervous energy of the merger's final hours. He sat at the kitchen island, his laptop open to a secure video conference with his global team. On the screen, 12 faces from London, Tokyo, Dubai, and New York looked at him, their expressions a mixture of exhaustion and awe. They were discussing the logistics of integrating 150,000 employees and navigating the complex web of international energy regulations. "The key," Liam said, his voice low and steady, "is to frame this not as an acquisition, but as a genuine merger of equals. We need to respect their corporate culture while migrating them to our more agile operational framework. David, I want you to personally oversee the integration in the EU. Prioritize employee retention. We bought their talent, not just their assets." "Got it, Liam," David Chen replied from his office overlooking the Thames. "The German regulators are already making noise. They're spooked." "They're not spooked, they're posturing," Liam countered. "They want assurances. I'll speak with Chancellor Brandt directly this afternoon. Schedule the call." Just then, Leo wandered into the kitchen, his pajamas on backward. "Daddy, I'm hungry. Can I have pancake circles?" Liam hit the mute button on his screen. The 12 most powerful figures in his new corporate empire watched as their visionary leader turned away from the camera. "Of course, buddy. Pancake circles coming right up." He smiled at his son, then unmuted the call. "Apologies, gentlemen. Domestic priorities. We'll reconvene in 1 hour. Execute the initial comms strategy as planned." He closed the laptop. The titans of industry vanished, replaced by the quiet hum of the refrigerator. He made the pancakes, carefully cutting them into perfect circles with the rim of a water glass, just as Leo liked them. As he flipped a pancake, his personal phone buzzed. It was a text from his mother-in-law, Eleanor. "Chloe tells me you're holding down the fort. How lovely of you to have the time. Do be a dear and check the sprinklers at our house. I think the gardener set them for too long and they're wasting water on the driveway. The control panel is in the garage. It's the green box. Don't touch the red one." Liam stared at the message. Wasting water. He had just orchestrated a deal that would fundamentally shift global investment into desalination and water reclamation technologies, a project that would provide clean drinking water to millions. and he was being asked to adjust a sprinkler timer because it was dampening a patch of asphalt. He typed a simple reply. "Of course, Eleanor, I'll take care of it." He had learned long ago that compliance was the path of least resistance. Resistance was a currency he saved for things that mattered. Later that morning, with Leo dropped off at his preschool, Liam drove his modest electric sedan, a car Marcus referred to as his golf cart, to the sprawling Preston estate in Beverly Hills. He found the green box in the garage, a space that housed a vintage Rolls-Royce and a new Ferrari, both covered in soft cloths. He adjusted the timer, the task taking all of 30 seconds. As he was leaving, a thought struck him. He walked over to the red box Eleanor had warned him about. It was the master control for the estate's security system. On a whim, he opened the panel. The system was antiquated, easily bypassed. More interesting was the small, dust-covered ledger tucked behind it. He pulled it out. It was a handwritten log of household expenses from years ago, kept by Chloe's late grandfather. He flipped through it, a relic of a bygone era. But tucked into the back was something more current, a sheaf of folded papers. He unfolded them. They were recent statements for a brokerage account in Eleanor's name. He scanned the numbers. His eyes, trained to find the narrative in a balance sheet, saw the story immediately. Risky, speculative investments, high leverage, margin calls. The account was hemorrhaging money. It was a portrait of quiet desperation, a desperate gamble to maintain a lifestyle that was no longer sustainable. He folded the papers and put them back exactly as he had found them. He closed the security panel. This information was dangerous. It was leverage, but using it felt wrong. It was not how he wanted to win. He wanted them to fall because of their own arrogance, not because he had uncovered their pathetic secrets. He left the garage, the knowledge settling in his mind like a cold stone. The great Preston legacy was a house of cards, and a strong wind was coming. That afternoon, he sat in his home office, a room Chloe had decorated with bookshelves filled with leather-bound, unread classics. He was on a video call with Chancellor Brandt of Germany. The Chancellor was a formidable woman, with a reputation for being direct. "Mr. Sterling," she began, her English perfect and crisp, "your new entity is larger than the GDP of several of our member states. You must understand our concern about the potential for market manipulation." Liam met her gaze without blinking. "Chancellor, I understand your concern completely, which is why our first public commitment is a €10 billion investment in a new green hydrogen facility in Hamburg. It will be the largest in the world, creating 5,000 local jobs and making Germany the leader in next-generation energy exports. We don't want to manipulate your market. We want to be your partner in building it." The Chancellor's stern expression softened almost imperceptibly. "That is a significant proposal, Mr. Sterling. My office will require the details. They are being sent to your Chief of Staff as we speak," Liam said. "I look forward to our collaboration." The call ended. Liam leaned back in his chair, the tension draining from his shoulders. He had just secured the support of the most powerful leader in Europe. His phone buzzed. It was a photo message from Chloe. It showed her and Marcus on a catamaran, champagne flutes in hand, the turquoise water of the Caribbean sparkling behind them. Marcus was grinning, his arms slung around his sister. The caption read, "The real VP of acquisitions. Hope you and Leo are surviving. Don't let him eat too much junk food." So. Liam looked at the photo, at their carefree, sun-kissed faces. Surviving. He looked around his office, at the silent evidence of a world they couldn't even imagine. He had spent the day redrawing the energy map of Europe, uncovering the rot at the heart of their family's finances, and making perfect pancake circles. He was more than surviving. He was quietly, patiently, and inexorably taking over their world. And they were sending him postcards from the edge of the abyss, completely oblivious to the ground crumbling beneath their feet. The irony was so profound, It was almost poetic. He saved the photo. It would be a useful artifact later, a memento of their blindness. The week unfolded in a rhythm of jarring juxtapositions. Mornings were for Leo, for building elaborate Lego castles, for trips to the park where Liam would push him on the swings, his mind half on the physics of momentum and half on sovereign debt restructuring. Afternoons were for running a global empire from his study. He negotiated with steel magnates in India while Leo napped. He finalized the corporate tax structure with his CFO in Zurich, while Mrs. Gable helped Leo with his alphabet flashcards downstairs. The world's most powerful people knew him as Sterling. His son knew him as Daddy. And his wife's family knew him as the guy who was available to let the plumber in. On Wednesday, Marcus called. Liam was in the middle of a delicate conversation with a consortium of Japanese investors, sketching out the schematics for a floating offshore wind farm on a digital tablet. He saw his brother-in-law's face pop up on his phone and excused himself from the video call for a moment. "Liam, my man!" Marcus's voice was loud, echoing slightly, as if he were in a large open space. "How's the babysitting club going?" "It's going fine, Marcus. Leo and I are having a good time," Liam said, his voice even. He could hear the clink of glasses and faint music in the background. "Good, good. Glad you're keeping busy," Marcus said with a chuckle. "Listen, I need a favor, a big one. My golf clubs. I completely forgot to pack them, and the course here is unreal. Could you be a legend and have them sent over? They're in the back of my closet. Just call one of those courier services, FedEx or whatever. Overnight them to the resort. I'll text you the address. You'll have to pay for it, of course, but I'll get you back. Sometime." Liam looked at the tablet on his desk, at the multi-billion-dollar renewable energy project paused mid-stroke. He was being asked to run an errand that was both trivial and deeply demeaning in its assumption of his time and resources. For a brief second, a hot flash of anger surged through him. He could have said no. He could have said, "Marcus, I'm in the middle of reorganizing a significant portion of the global energy grid. Ship your own damn clubs." But he didn't. The strategic part of his brain, the part that had spent 2 years planning the merger, took over. Every act of condescension, every casual insult, was a stone. He could throw them back, or he could use them to build a foundation for what was to come. He was a builder, after all. "Sure, Marcus, no problem," Liam said calmly. "Consider it done." "You're a lifesaver, man. I owe you one," Marcus said, the promise as empty as the air it traveled through. "Chloe sends her love. She's getting a massage. The poor thing is so stressed from all the relaxing." He laughed again, a braying sound of pure, unadulterated privilege. "All right, gotta run. Tea time. Don't scratch the driver when you're packing it." The line went dead. Liam stood in the silence of his office. He took a slow, deep breath. Then he walked to his closet and pulled out the worn leather portfolio he always carried. He opened it, not to the blueprints or the deal memos, but to a blank page in the small moleskin notebook he kept tucked inside. He uncapped a fountain pen. With precise architectural lettering, he wrote, "Item number 1. Asked to courier golf clubs to St. Bart's. Implication, my time is worthless. Financial imposition treated as trivial." He paused, then added, "Item number 2. Mother-in-law's request to adjust sprinklers. Role, unpaid groundskeeper." He continued writing, creating a list, a quiet accounting of years of slights, both large and small. The time Eleanor had joked at a dinner party that his firm's greatest asset was Chloe's maiden name. The time Marcus had given him a book titled Networking for Dummies as a Christmas gift. The countless times Chloe had defended their behavior with the phrase, "Oh, that's just how they are. Don't be so sensitive." Each memory was a line item in a ledger of disrespect. He was not a man given to anger, but to order. And this was his way of ordering the chaos of their disdain. This list was not for them. It was for him. It was a reminder of why he had kept his secret for so long, and why the time for secrets was coming to an end. It was the moral framework for the reckoning that was now inevitable. He spent the next hour arranging the courier for the golf clubs, paying the exorbitant fee for international overnight shipping without a second thought. It was a rounding error on the interest his personal accounts earned in a single day. Then he returned to his call with the Japanese investors. He apologized for the interruption, blaming a minor household issue. They nodded, accepting the explanation without question. In their world, a man of Liam's stature had staff to handle such things. The irony was that, for this 1 week, he had become his own staff. That evening, as he was giving Leo his bath, his phone rang again. It was Chloe. "Hi, darling," she said. Her voice was languid, heavy with sun and leisure. "Are you surviving?" "We're thriving," he said, smiling as Leo splashed water onto the floor. "How's the vacation?" "It's divine. Absolutely divine. Marcus is in his element, of course. Everyone here knows him, or knows of Daddy. We had dinner with the Vanderbilts last night, the real Vanderbilts." The emphasis was unsubtle. "We are with important people. You are not. Listen, I was talking to Mother, and she's decided she wants to host a little dinner party when we get back, to celebrate Marcus's promotion properly. Next Saturday, it will be just family and a few of Father's important business partners. You'll need to be there, of course." "Of course," Liam said, his voice neutral. "And Liam, try to, mingle a bit. Don't just stand in the corner talking about sustainable concrete or whatever it is you do. It's a big night for Marcus. We all need to be supportive." Supportive. The word was a weapon in her hands. To her, being supportive meant being invisible. It meant nodding along, smiling pleasantly, and not embarrassing her with his earnest, middle-class ambitions. It meant playing his role in the grand theater of Preston family life. "I'll be there, Chloe," he said, his mind already working, shifting pieces on the board. A dinner party, a captive audience, her father's business partners. The stage was being set for him. They were, in their arrogance, handing him the perfect platform. "Wonderful," she said, her duty done. "Okay, I have to go. We're going for sunset cocktails. Kiss Leo for me." The line went dead. Liam looked at his son, who was happily making a beard out of soap bubbles. He felt a wave of love for the boy so pure and fierce it almost took his breath away. Everything he was doing, everything he was about to do, was for him. To build him a world based on truth, not illusion. To show him that a man's worth is not in his name or his connections, but in what he creates and the integrity with which he creates it. "Daddy, look, I'm Santa Claus," Leo giggled. Liam laughed, a deep, genuine laugh. "You sure are, buddy. You sure are." He knew then that when the time came, he would not act out of anger or a desire for revenge. He would act out of love. It would be a correction, a realignment of a universe that had been knocked off its axis by the heavy, dead weight of unearned pride. The dinner party wouldn't be a celebration of Marcus's promotion. It would be the unveiling of a new world order. And he, the quiet architect, was the one who would be drawing the plans. The final days before their return were the quiet before the storm. Liam operated with a placid, almost unnerving calm. He fulfilled his duties as a father with gentle precision. Each school run and bedtime story a small sacred ritual. In between, he commanded his empire with the same quiet authority. He approved a multi-billion-dollar bond offering from his living room couch. He reviewed and rejected a marketing campaign for the new company logo while waiting in line at the grocery store. He was a ghost in the machine of global finance, his influence everywhere and his presence nowhere. He received another text from Eleanor. "Liam, the caterer for Saturday's party needs to do a walkthrough. Can you be at the house tomorrow at 10 a.m. to let them in? I'd asked the housekeeper, but she's so unreliable." He replied with his now standard, "Of course." He added it to his list. Item number 14, acting as de facto house manager for family events. reinforce his status as auxiliary help. When he met the caterer the next day at the Preston mansion, the man, a harried-looking fellow named Jean-Pierre, looked at Liam's simple attire and assumed he was a member of the household staff. "You the house manager?" Jean-Pierre asked, not unkindly. "Mrs. Preston said someone would be here. We need to check the circuit capacity for the warming ovens, and I need to see the walk-in freezer." Instead of correcting him, Liam simply nodded. "Right this way." He led the man through the cavernous kitchen, answering his technical questions about amperage and gas lines with a surprising degree of expertise. Jean-Pierre was impressed. "You know your stuff," the caterer said, scribbling notes on a clipboard. "Most of the guys in these houses don't know a fuse box from a lunchbox." "I like to know how things work," Liam said with a small smile. As they were finishing, Liam's phone buzzed. It was a secure message from his chief of staff, a woman named Anya Sharma, a formidable ex-MI6 analyst he had hired for her discretion and strategic mind. The message contained a single attachment, a highly confidential, final due diligence report on Preston and Sons development. He had commissioned it weeks ago, not out of malice, but out of a need for a complete operational picture. As the saying went, keep your friends close and your in-laws' financials closer. He opened the file. The story it told was even grimmer than he had gleaned from Eleanor's brokerage statements. The company was over-leveraged, exposed on 3 major condominium projects that were stalled due to zoning disputes and cost overruns. Their lenders were getting nervous. A major debt covenant was due to be tested in less than 30 days, and they were projected to fail it, triggering a default that would bring the whole enterprise crashing down. Marcus's promotion to VP of Acquisitions was a desperate, cosmetic move to project an image of strength to the market. He wasn't acquiring anything. He was in charge of a division with no capital and no mandate. He was the captain of a sinking ship, and they had just given him a brand new ceremonial hat. Liam closed the file. The information was a loaded weapon. He felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't pity, but it wasn't satisfaction either. It was the cold, clean feeling of a diagnosis being confirmed. The disease was pride. The prognosis was terminal. He thanked Jean-Pierre, who patted him on the shoulder. "You're a good man. Tell Mrs. Preston she's lucky to have you." "I'll be sure to do that," Liam said. On Friday, the day before Chloe and Marcus were due back, Liam took Leo out of school for the afternoon. He drove them not to a park or a museum, but to a vast, empty plot of land on the outskirts of the city. It was a dusty, forgotten stretch of industrial wasteland, bordered by a polluted river and a defunct railway line. "Where are we, Daddy?" Leo asked, looking at the bleak landscape. Liam took his son's hand and walked him to the center of the plot. He crouched down so they were at eye level. "This looks like nothing, right?" Leo nodded. "Well, in my head," Liam said, tapping his temple, "I see a city. I see buildings so tall they touch the clouds, but they're covered in trees and gardens. I see a school here where you could learn, and a park here with a river that's clean enough to swim in. I see homes for thousands of people, all powered by the sun and the wind. No smoke, no noise, just clean energy." He pulled the worn leather portfolio from the car and opened it on the ground. He showed Leo the renderings, vibrant, futuristic images of a green utopia. "You draw good," Leo said, his little finger tracing the outline of a skyscraper that looked like a great, twisting tree. "It's not just drawing, buddy," Liam said softly. "It's about seeing what isn't there yet. It's about building something better. That's what our family does. We build." He had never spoken to his son like this before. He was planting a seed, a different idea of the sterling name than the one Leo might have heard whispered at Preston family gatherings. He wasn't just Daddy who made pancakes. He was Daddy who built cities out of nothing. That evening, the house was quiet. Leo was asleep. Liam sat in the dark, the city lights twinkling in the canyon below. He felt a profound sense of calm. He had made his calls. He had laid his plans. The pieces were all in place. He had not sought this confrontation, but it had come for him all the same. His wife and her family believed they operated from a position of unassailable strength. They believed he was a guest in their world. They were about to learn that they had been living in his all along. The front door opened. Chloe was home. She dropped her bags in the entryway, looking tanned, exhausted, and beautiful. "God, I'm so tired," she sighed, kicking off her heels. "That flight was brutal. Marcus is such a diva about turbulence." She looked around the spotless house. "Well, it looks like the place didn't burn down. Good job." She came over and gave him a quick, distracted kiss. "Did you miss me?" "I did," he said, and it was the truth. He had missed the woman he had married, the woman who existed somewhere beneath the layers of Preston privilege. He hoped, for both their sakes, that he would see her again soon. "How was Leo? Did you survive?" "We thrived," he repeated his line from the phone call. She smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "Good. I'm going to go take a long bath. The party tomorrow is going to be exhausting. Mother has been texting me non-stop about seating charts. She's putting you next to old Mr. Abernathy. He's deaf as a post, so you two should have a lovely chat about, I don't know, concrete." She laughed, and the sound no longer grated on him. It was just a sound, a data point, another entry for the ledger. He watched her walk up the stairs, oblivious and confident. The quiet before the storm was officially over. The first drops of rain were beginning to fall. Saturday arrived, heavy and humid. A thick marine layer clung to the canyons, muffling the world in a blanket of gray. It felt appropriate. Liam spent the morning with Leo, a bubble of normalcy in a day destined for anything but. He dressed his son in a smart little suit, and then himself in a dark, impeccably tailored suit he'd had made in Savile Row, but had never worn in front of Chloe's family. It was a suit that signaled not flash, but substance, power worn with ease. When Chloe saw him, she did a double take. "Wow, look at you. Where did that come from?" "It was in the back of the closet," he said simply. She looked him up and down, a flicker of something, surprise, appreciation, in her eyes. "Well, you clean up nicely. Try not to spill anything on it." The compliment, as always, came with a barb attached. They drove to the Preston mansion in Chloe's gleaming white Range Rover. Liam insisted. He wanted to arrive as they expected him to, as a passenger. As they pulled up the long, winding driveway, past the rows of valet-parked Mercedes and BMWs, Liam felt his heart rate remain perfectly steady. He was not nervous. He was prepared. This was no different from a final board meeting before a hostile takeover. You know your position, you know their weaknesses, and you control the flow of information. The house was ablaze with light, overflowing with flowers and the sound of muted chatter in clinking glasses. Eleanor Preston, a vision in a severe silk dress and a formidable diamond necklace, greeted them at the door. She kissed Chloe, then turned to Liam, her eyes giving his suit a quick, dismissive appraisal. "Liam, you came," she said, as if his attendance had been in doubt. "Chloe, darling, you look divine. Marcus is holding court by the fireplace. He's been telling everyone the most hilarious stories about St. Bart's. Go, go." She shooed her daughter away, then turned back to Liam. "Now, Liam, your seat is at the end of the table, next to Mr. Abernathy. He's a bit dotty, but a very important client of your father-in-law's, so please be agreeable." The instructions were clear. Sit down, shut up, and don't cause a scene. Liam just smiled, a calm, pleasant smile. "Of course, Eleanor. I'm looking forward to it." He made his way through the crowd, a ghost in their midst. He saw Chloe's father, Arthur Preston, a portly man with a florid face, laughing loudly with a group of men his age. He saw Marcus, the man of the hour, leaning against the marble mantelpiece, a glass of scotch in his hand, looking smug and triumphant. He was surrounded by a circle of admirers, his sister included. Liam didn't try to join the circle. He went to the bar and got a glass of sparkling water. As he stood there, a man he didn't recognize approached him. He was older, with kind eyes and a sharp suit. "You must be Liam Sterling," the man said, extending a hand. "I'm Charles Harrison." Liam knew the name instantly. Charles Harrison was a legend in finance, a semi-retired investment banker known for his Midas touch and his unimpeachable integrity. He was one of the important business partners Arthur was so keen to impress. He was also secretly one of Liam's oldest mentors. It was Harrison who had provided the seed capital for Liam's firm a decade ago, and it was Harrison who had sat on his secret advisory board for the merger. His presence here was no coincidence. Liam had called him 3 days ago. "Mr. Harrison," Liam said, shaking his hand warmly, "it's a pleasure to see you again. I didn't know you were friends with the Prestons." Harrison's eyes twinkled. "Our circles occasionally overlap, though I confess my main reason for being here tonight is you, my boy. I read about the merger, the Sterling Accord. My God, Liam, you actually did it, pulled the sword from the stone. It's the deal of the century. I'm immensely proud of you." They spoke quietly for a few minutes, two titans of finance talking shop, while a room full of regional real estate developers boasted about golf handicaps. Marcus, seeing them talking, sauntered over, an amused smirk on his face. "Charles, good to see you," Marcus boomed, clapping Harrison on the back a little too hard. "I see you've met my brother-in-law." He draped an arm over Liam's shoulders. "Trying to get some architectural tips for your next guest house?" Harrison's smile became tight, professional. "On the contrary, Marcus, I was just congratulating Liam on his recent success. It's quite staggering." Marcus's smirk widened. He thought Harrison was playing along, humoring Liam. "Oh, is he? Landed a big one, did you, Liam? A new carport? A fancy garden shed?" He winked at Harrison, trying to draw him into the joke. Liam didn't react. He simply looked at Marcus, his expression unreadable. "Something like that," he said softly. The call for dinner came, saving Marcus from the awkward silence that followed. They all moved to the grand dining room, where a long table was set with a terrifying amount of silverware. Liam found his seat at the far end, the Death Valley of the seating chart, next to a slumbering Mr. Abernathy. He was positioned as far from the center of power, Arthur at one end, Marcus at the other, as was physically possible. It was perfect. An attack from the periphery is always the most unexpected. The dinner began. The first few courses were a blur of condescension. Arthur Preston stood to make a toast. He spoke at length about the Preston legacy, about grit and vision, and about his son Marcus, the brilliant new VP who was poised to take the family firm to stratospheric new heights. The room applauded enthusiastically. Marcus soaked it in, raising his glass with a magnanimous smile. Throughout the meal, the conversation swirled around him. He heard Chloe, seated near the center, telling a story about the trip. And then Marcus tells the pilot, "Don't you know who my father is?" It was hysterical. He heard Eleanor complaining about the city council's zoning board. He heard Arthur holding forth on the decline of modern architecture, saying, "They don't build things to last anymore. It's all glass and eco-nonsense." He shot a pointed look down the table at Liam. Liam ate his sea bass. He listened. He waited. He knew the moment would come. Arrogance, like a star, has a predictable life cycle. It burns brightly, expands, and then collapses under its own weight. Marcus's collapse was imminent. It came with dessert. Flushed with wine and adulation, Marcus stood up, tapping his glass for attention. "If I could just say a few words," he began, his voice slurring slightly. "I want to thank you all for being here. This promotion, it's not just for me. It's for the family. It's for the legacy. It's about doing real business, building things you can see, things you can touch, not, you know." He gestured vaguely down the table in Liam's direction. tinkering with computer models and drawing pictures of imaginary buildings. It's about being in the real world, making real money. The jab was so direct, so public, that a brief, uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Chloe shifted in her seat, a faint blush on her cheeks. She shot Liam a look that said, "Please, don't react." But this time Liam did. He didn't get angry. He didn't raise his voice. He simply set his fork down, dabbed his lips with his napkin, and looked directly at Marcus. "That's an interesting perspective, Marcus," he said, his voice calm and clear, carrying easily down the length of the table. "Tell me, what's the acquisition budget you're working with in your new role?" The question was so unexpected, so out of character, that Marcus was momentarily stunned. "What? What kind of question is that?" "A simple one," Liam said. "You're the VP of Acquisitions. I assume you have capital to acquire things. Is it 100 million? 500?
What's the number?
Marcus sputtered, his face turning red. That's confidential company information." "Is it?" Liam tilted his head. "Because I've seen your company's balance sheet. I would have thought the number was closer to 0. A gasp went around the table. Arthur Preston's face went from florid to a dangerous shade of purple. "Now see here, Liam, that is completely out of line." Liam ignored him, his eyes still locked on Marcus. "You're not a VP of Acquisitions, Marcus. You're a figurehead, a piece of marketing designed to reassure lenders that are about to pull your credit lines. Preston and Sons is 30 days from defaulting on its primary debt covenant. You're not in a position to acquire a vending machine, let alone another company." The silence in the room was now absolute, a thick, ringing void. Every eye was on Liam. Chloe looked horrified, her face pale. "Liam, what are you doing?" "Stop it. I'm just clarifying a few things," Liam said, his voice still unnervingly calm. He turned his gaze to his father-in-law. "You're right, Arthur. They don't build things to last anymore. Your grandfather built a solid company. You and your son have turned it into a house of cards, leveraged to the hilt, all to fund a lifestyle you can no longer afford." He glanced at Eleanor, whose hand was at her throat, her diamonds suddenly looking like cheap glass. "Those speculative tech stocks aren't going to save you, Eleanor. You've already had 3 margin calls. The next one will wipe you out." The devastation was total. He had taken their secrets, the ones they thought were safely hidden in the dark, and laid them bare on the dinner table for all their important friends to see. Marcus finally found his voice, a strangled, furious whisper. "Who the hell do you think you are? You're nobody. You're a charity case we let into our family." Liam let the insult hang in the air for a moment. Then he gave a small, sad smile. "That seems to be a common misconception." He paused, then delivered the final, quiet blow. "You asked what I've been tinkering with. This past week, while I was babysitting, I was also managing the post-merger integration of 2 of the world's largest energy corporations. It was a deal I've been structuring for the past 2 years. A deal that closed last Monday for $74 billion. A fork clattered onto a plate. The sound was like a gunshot. Old Mr. Abernathy, who had been sleeping soundly, woke with a start. "70 billion?" Arthur stammered, his voice barely a croak. He looked to Charles Harrison for confirmation, for some sign that this was a joke. Charles Harrison, who had been watching the entire exchange with a neutral expression, now leaned forward. He placed his napkin on the table and spoke in a clear, authoritative voice that commanded the room's full attention. "The number is actually closer to 75 billion if you include the assumed debt. But Liam is being modest." He looked around the table, his gaze lingering on Arthur and Marcus. "Gentlemen, you are not in the presence of a nobody. You are in the presence of one of the most brilliant strategic minds of his generation. The financial world is calling it the Sterling Accord. Your brother-in-law doesn't just draw pictures of buildings. He is, for all intents and purposes, redrawing the future of the global economy." Harrison's words landed with the force of a physical blow. The Prestons seemed to shrink in their chairs. The arrogance, the pride, the generations of unearned confidence, it all evaporated in an instant, replaced by a raw, gaping vulnerability. Liam looked at his wife. Chloe was staring at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and something else he couldn't yet decipher. He had just detonated a bomb in the middle of her life, and the fallout was only just beginning to settle. He had won. He had achieved the reversal he had so patiently planned. But as he looked at her shattered expression, he felt no triumph, only a deep, aching sadness for the chasm that had just opened up between them. The real work, the work of rebuilding, was about to begin, and it would be far harder than any merger. The silence that followed Charles Harrison's pronouncement was not empty. It was filled with the deafening sound of paradigms shifting, of entire worldviews collapsing. The air itself seemed to crackle with the energy of the revelation. The important guests, who moments before had been sycophants to the Preston dynasty, now looked at Liam with a new, nakedly calculating respect. They were rats, and they could smell the cheese moving to a different part of the maze. Marcus was the first to break. His face, which had cycled through crimson rage and ashen shock, now crumpled into a mask of pathetic desperation. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "No, that's not. It's a trick. He's lying." He looked wildly around the table, seeking an ally, a single face that would validate his disbelief. He found none. His gaze fell on Charles Harrison. "Charles, you're in on this? It's a joke, right? A cruel joke." Harrison looked at Marcus with an expression of profound disappointment, the kind a teacher reserves for a student who has failed the simplest of tests. "The only joke here, Marcus, is your title. Liam's company, Sterling Terra, is now a global powerhouse. To put it in terms you might understand, its market capitalization is roughly 500 times that of Preston and Sons, on a good day." Each word was a nail in the coffin of Marcus's pride. He sank back into his chair, his mouth hanging open, the fight completely gone from him. He looked like a deflated balloon. Arthur Preston, however, was made of sterner, more pragmatic stuff. The shock was already giving way to a frantic, reptilian calculation. He saw not the humiliation, but the potential lifeline. He cleared his throat, his voice raspy. "Liam, son, if this is true, my God, we had no idea you kept this so quiet. Why?" Liam finally turned his full attention to his father-in-law. His expression was not angry or triumphant, but weary, as if he were explaining a complex equation to a child for the 10th time. "I kept it quiet, Arthur, because I wanted to be a husband and a father, not a bank. I wanted to be valued for who I am, not for what I have. I wanted to see if the love and respect in this family were conditional. For years, I've had my answer." He let that statement settle. He then pulled his phone from his pocket, his movements deliberate and calm. He tapped the screen a few times and placed it on the table. It was the photo Chloe had sent him from St. Bart's. Him and Marcus, grinning on the catamaran. "This is a picture of my wife on vacation with her brother," Liam said, his voice soft but carrying in the stillness. "She told me she had to go to celebrate his big promotion. The truth is she went because she was bored, and because she believes my time has no value. While she was gone, I was asked to act as a courier, a handyman, and a general dog's body, all while finalizing a deal that will affect the lives of millions. I wasn't holding down the fort. I was running a multinational corporation from my son's playroom." He looked directly at Chloe. For the first time, her mask of horrified shock cracked, revealing the raw wound beneath. Tears welled in her eyes as the full weight of her actions, her assumptions, her casual dismissiveness crashed down upon her. She had treated a king like a court jester, not because he was disguised, but because she had never bothered to truly look at him. "Liam, I didn't know," she whispered, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. "That's the point, Chloe," he said, his voice softening with a deep sadness. "You didn't know because you never asked. You never looked. You saw what you wanted to see, the simple, unambitious man who was lucky to have married a Preston. It was an easier narrative to accept than the truth." He then reached into his jacket and pulled out the small, moleskin notebook from his portfolio. He opened it on the table. "For years I've endured the jokes, the condescension, the casual disrespect. I never said anything. I absorbed it, but I kept a record." He looked at Eleanor. "The time you joked that I was riding Chloe's coattails." He looked at Arthur. "The time you lectured me on the impracticality of solar power, a field in which I hold 12 patents." He looked back at Marcus. "The book on networking you gave me for Christmas 2 years ago. I've cataloged every single slight, not for revenge, but for clarity, to remind myself that this wasn't in my head. This was real." The list of grievances, spoken aloud, transformed from petty insults into a crushing indictment of their character. It was a mirror, and the reflection it showed was ugly and distorted with cruelty. Eleanor began to sob, not with remorse, but with the sheer terror of social annihilation. Her world was built on a foundation of appearances, and Liam had just demolished it. It was then that Arthur made his move. The old predator saw his chance. He stood up, his face a mask of manufactured contrition. "Liam, you are right. We have been unforgivably blind. We have failed you as a family, and for that, I am profoundly sorry." He came around the table and put a hand on Liam's shoulder. "But you are family, and family helps each other. Your company, this new, powerful company, it could help us. A small investment, a bridge loan, it would be nothing to you, but it would save us. It would save the Preston legacy, for Chloe, for your son, Leo." It was a masterful pivot, from disgrace to a plea for a bailout, all wrapped in the sacred cloak of family. Liam looked up at his father-in-law's hand on his shoulder. He did not shrug it off. He simply let it rest there, a dead weight. "The Sterling Accords portfolio includes a new strategic fund," Liam said, his voice devoid of emotion. "It's a $20 billion fund dedicated to acquiring and restructuring distressed assets in the real estate and energy sectors. We identify failing companies with good underlying potential, clear out the incompetent management, and rebuild them from the ground up." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "Preston and Sons is on our list of potential acquisitions." Arthur's face went white. This wasn't an offer of help. It was a threat, a takeover. "You wouldn't," Arthur breathed. "I would," Liam stated matter-of-factly. "It makes good business sense. Your portfolio of land is undervalued and poorly managed. With the right leadership, it could be very profitable." He finally looked Arthur in the eye. "I will save your company, Arthur, but not for you. It will be absorbed into my corporation. You will be retired. Eleanor will be given a modest but comfortable pension. Marcus," he glanced at his brother-in-law, who looked like he was about to be physically ill, "will be given a severance package and a list of recommended career counselors. The Preston name will be removed from the letterhead. The company will be rebuilt on a foundation of integrity and competence, not arrogance and nepotism." He stood up, his presence suddenly filling the room. "These are my terms, not for negotiation. You will accept them, or I will let you fail. And when you do, I will buy your assets from the bankruptcy court for pennies on the dollar. The outcome for me is the same either way. The only difference is whether or not your family has a shred of dignity left." He turned to leave, his point made. The power dynamics in the room irrevocably, permanently altered. "Liam, wait!" It was Chloe. She had stood up, her face streaked with tears, her hands trembling. She looked from her shattered family to the man she now realized she had never known. The choice was before her, stark and terrible. Her family's pride or her husband's love, the past or the future. "Don't go," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Please, let's talk." Liam stopped at the door. He looked back at her, his expression unreadable. "There is nothing left to talk about tonight, Chloe. There are only choices left to make. You need to decide which family you belong to. The one that is built on lies and condescension, or the one you and I could build together, based on truth and mutual respect." He looked at his mentor. "Charles, thank you for coming." "Any time, my boy," Harrison said with a nod. And with that, Liam Sterling walked out of the Preston mansion, leaving behind the wreckage of their broken world. He stepped out into the cool night air, the gray marine layer having finally burned off, revealing a sky full of brilliant, distant stars. He felt no joy, no thrill of victory, only the heavy burden of his own power and the long, uncertain road ahead. He had won the war, but he didn't know if he had just lost his wife. The drive home was silent. Chloe sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the blurred lights of the city. She didn't speak, didn't cry. She seemed to be in a state of profound shock, processing a reality that had been completely rewritten in the space of 30 minutes. Liam didn't push her. He knew that any words from him right now would be perceived as either accusation or pity. What she needed was silence to confront the truth on her own. When they arrived home, she went straight upstairs. Liam checked on Leo, who was sleeping soundly, his small face peaceful and untroubled. He stood over his son's bed for a long time, the quiet rhythm of his breathing a steady anchor in the turbulent sea of the evening's events. This was what mattered, this small, innocent life. Everything he had done to protect this, to ensure his son grew up in a world where worth was measured by character, not by a last name. He went to his office and sat in the dark, looking out at the canyon. He felt a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. The adrenaline of the confrontation had faded, leaving behind the hollow ache of broken trust. He had exposed the rot in Chloe's family, but in doing so, he had also exposed the deep fracture in his own marriage. He had kept a secret, a massive, life-altering secret, for years. He had his reasons he felt were justified, but a secret was a secret. It was a wall he had built between them. He had just torn down their illusions, but now he had to see if they could find their way back to each other over the rubble of his own deception. An hour passed. He heard footsteps and saw Chloe standing in the doorway, wrapped in a robe, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked younger, more vulnerable than he had seen her in years. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice small. He nodded. She came and sat in the chair opposite his desk, curling her feet up beneath her. For a long time she just looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time. $74 billion, she said finally, the number a strange, alien sound in her mouth. "You're one of them." "One of who?" he asked gently. "The people my father is always trying to impress. The people who get invited onto yachts in Monaco. The people who don't have to introduce themselves because everyone already knows who they are." She shook her head in disbelief. "And I asked you to pick up my dry cleaning." A tear traced a path down her cheek. "I am so sorry, Liam." It was the first time she had apologized without an excuse, without a but. It was just a clean, simple admission. "I was a fool. I was a snob. My mother. Everything you said tonight was true, all of it. I heard it, I saw it, and I am so ashamed." Liam listened, his heart aching for her, for them. "I'm sorry too, Chloe," he said, and he meant it. "I should have told you. I should have trusted you with my success. I hid it because I was afraid you'd only love me for the money. And in hiding it, I think I guaranteed that you never got the chance to love the real me at all. I built a wall between us." "No," she said, shaking her head fiercely. "You didn't build it. I did. I built it with every dismissive comment. Every time I took my family's side against you. Every time I made you feel small so I could feel big. I was so insecure, so desperate to live up to the Preston name that I couldn't see the incredible man right in front of me. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the same view he had been staring at. My father called. While I was in the bath, he didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask about us. He told me to fix it. He told me to convince you to accept a partnership, to save his name. He was still trying to use me, to use us, as a pawn in his game. She turned to face him, her eyes clear and resolute. I told him that the Preston legacy he was so obsessed with was dead. I told him it died of arrogance and pride. I told him that my family was here, in this house, with you and Leo, and that if he ever wanted to be a part of it, he would have to earn his way back in, with humility and respect. I told him not to call me again until he understood what that meant. Liam was stunned. In one conversation, she had done what he had thought impossible. She had chosen. She had cut the cord. She had shed the skin of the Preston dynasty and stood before him as just Chloe. He won't, Liam said quietly. He won't understand. I know, she said, her voice filled with a sad certainty. But I had to say it, for me, and for us. She crossed the room and knelt in front of his chair, taking his hands in hers. Her hands were trembling. I don't know that man who commanded that room tonight. I don't know the man who speaks to chancellors and topples corporate giants. I want to. I want to know all of you, Liam. The man who makes pancake circles and the man who builds cities in the sky. If you'll let me, if it's not too late. He looked down at their joined hands. He saw the years of hurt, the secrets, the walls. But he also saw a glimmer of hope, a chance to build something new, something real, something that wasn't there before. It's not too late, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He pulled her up into his arms, and for the first time in a very long time, they held each other not as a habit, but as a choice, a new beginning. The days that followed were quiet and tentative. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape that was irrevocably altered. Liam followed through on his promise. He initiated a hostile takeover of Preston and Sons. Arthur and Marcus fought it, issuing furious press releases and making desperate calls to their dwindling network of allies. But it was futile. It was like a rowboat trying to stop an aircraft carrier. Within a month, the company was absorbed. The name was changed to Terra Urban Development, a new division of Sterling Terra. Arthur and Eleanor were forced into a quiet, humiliating retirement in a much smaller house. Marcus, stripped of his title and his inheritance, vanished, reportedly moving to South America to find himself. Chloe watched it all happen with a quiet sadness, but also with a sense of resolute peace. She was mourning the family she thought she had, but she was not mourning the one she had lost. She threw herself into learning about Liam's world. She read the articles about him, studied his designs, and asked endless questions. She wanted to understand the work, the passion, the vision she had been blind to for so long. One evening, a few months later, Liam came home to find Chloe in his office. She was not on her phone or looking at a fashion magazine. She was sitting at his desk, sketching on a piece of paper. "What are you doing?" he asked, a smile playing on his lips. She looked up, a little shy. "I had an idea for the headquarters, the big one you're designing. You always talk about building communities, not just buildings. What if there was a school inside it? A public school focused on science and design, sponsored by the company. A place where any kid from any background could learn to build the future." Liam looked at her drawing. It was rough, amateurish, but the idea was brilliant. It was compassionate. It was exactly the kind of thinking he championed. He saw in her sketch not just a school, but a reflection of her own transformation. She was no longer just decorating spaces. She was thinking about how to build them with purpose. He came and stood behind her, putting his arms around her. "That," he said, his voice soft, "is a billion-dollar idea." She leaned back against him, her contentment a palpable thing. "I guess I was finally listening," she whispered. They stood there for a long time, looking at the drawing together. The house was quiet, filled with a new kind of peace. Not the sterile silence of before, but a warm, living stillness. Outside, the city lights of Los Angeles twinkled, a vast galaxy of stories. And in this one house, in this one room, a new story was being written. It wasn't a story of revenge or of vindication. It was a story of redemption, of two people finding their way back to each other, not by erasing the past, but by choosing to build a better future, together. The architect had finally found his partner. And so we come to the end of our story. Liam found that his greatest project was not the one valued at $74 billion, but the one he was building at home, a foundation of honesty and renewed love with Chloe. They learned that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or status, but in mutual respect and shared dreams. The Prestons learned a much harder lesson, that arrogance is a hollow fortress, and that respect is something that must be earned, not demanded. In the end, it's a powerful reminder that the most valuable assets we have are our integrity and the people who see us and love us for who we truly are. What do you think? Did Chloe deserve a second chance? Or should Liam have walked away? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is what makes this community so special. If you enjoyed this journey, please don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories that I hope will make you think and feel. Thank you for spending your time here today. Until next time, remember to be kind, be honest, and never underestimate the quiet ones.